Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. At the G7 summit held in southern Germany last week, world leaders warned about climate change. They made huge promises about lowering carbon emissions, but gave no clue as to how they would do it. That's probably because they have no clue in how to do it. They talked about terrorism in general and ISIS in particular, but made no significant decisions. They talked about the debt crisis in Greece and its potential to undo much of the European Union. Time magazine said the only help Greece got in the end from the G7 summit was Obama plaintively asking all sides to show sufficient flexibility. While the world's political leaders met in Bavaria, their money masters at the Bilderberg Group gathered in Austria, less than 20 miles away. Bilderberg is a highly secretive organization formed in 1954 to strengthen the ties between Europe and North America. They hold an annual gathering of the world's elite, and it's by invitation only. They allow no press coverage. They have their own police force, and you dare not cross them. Daniel Esterlin, author of The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, he has been studying them for 14 years. He paints a grim picture of what goes on beneath the many layers of secrecy protecting the elite of the elite. He calls Bilderberg a shadow world government. According to leaked information about the last week's event, the participants discussed putting more capital controls on the average citizen. They talked about ways of turning the whole world into a cashless society. The obvious advantage of going cashless is the ability to trace terrorism funding and drug trafficking. But a less obvious advantage is the ability of the world's huge banking conglomerates to control the movement of money. This allows prompt emergency management in case of an economic collapse. It also allows the world's primary funding institution to punish the nations, businesses, and individuals that step out of line. Those who control the flow of money control the world. This fits the Bible's prophetic scenario. It leads perfectly toward what the Bible calls the mark of the beast. A chip inserted in the body along with a mark on the outside seems to be an obvious answer to problems like tax evasion, computer fraud, and terror funding. Benefits of the mark of the beast are beginning to fall like ripe fruit into the hand. The Bilderberg Group seems to want world government. Economically, they're almost there. One of the major topics of discussion at the Bilderberg was the need for TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. TTIP is one of the trade agreements over which President Obama wants fast-track authority. Last week, the House of Representatives voted down a key piece of fast-track legislation. As of this taping, the President and his Republican allies are trying to put together something more palatable to at least a few more Democrats. Our production schedule doesn't allow me to give you the very latest news. However, we can step back and look at the big picture on these trade proposals in the light of Bible prophecy. Regardless of what happens around this immediate issue, expect more of this sort of thing. Specifically, look for global government initiatives disguised as trade agreements. This deception is very much in line with Bible prophecy. Most of the President's allies on this are Republicans, with a few Democrats sprinkled in. Republicans like trade deals. They vote for them almost reflexively. Such agreements have a long history of usually, though not always, helping the economies of the nations involved. But this is a whole new thing. Ironically, most of the president's opponents are from his own party, the Democrats. The coalition against the new trade authority is composed of liberals like Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts and conservatives like Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama. It consists of Tea Party groups and labor unions. The New York Times described the legislation as granting the president trade promotion authority the power to negotiate trade deals that cannot be amended or filibustered by the Congress. Popular anger against these proposals is strong, and for good reason. Michelle Malkin said the Obama administration House GOP leader John Boehner and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have sold out American sovereignty. Their so-called Trans-Pacific Partnership Commission will have sweeping authority over trade, immigration, environmental, labor, and commerce regulations. The secrecy surrounding these trade pacts makes many Americans suspicious. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, that is TPP, includes 12 nations representing 40% of the world's economy. But the document has been classified. Members of Congress are only allowed to read it under carefully controlled conditions. There are 2 copies on Capitol Hill. They are kept in small reading rooms in the basement at each end of the Capitol building. Congressmen are not allowed to bring their staff members into the room. They have to check their cell phones at the door. They're handed the trade bill, one section at a time, and carefully watched as they read it. If they take any notes while reading, they must hand those notes over to the security before leaving the room. Because of laws pertaining to classified information, they are not allowed to discuss what they have read. Surprisingly, some prominent, usually conservative Republicans are leading the charge for President Obama. They say not to worry about the secrecy because the information will be declassified and made public once it's agreed to. It's like Nancy Pelosi's famous statement on Obamacare: we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it. Does that sound like democracy in action? The Gettysburg Address ends with a call for the renewed dedication to the task of making sure that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Secret presidential authority is not of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the America we once knew is fast perishing. Even Congress doesn't know what the president has promised foreign governments in the ongoing negotiations. In effect, they don't know what they're voting for. The president also wants fast-track authority on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Both of these are huge partnerships. They will establish international governing bodies with tremendous power over all Americans in a number of areas. The Trade and Service Agreements, or TISA, includes 51 nations scattered all over the world, and it covers banking, health care, and transportation reforms. If even a little of what has been leaked is true, then it leads to a brave new world indeed. Daniel Horowitz, writing in Conservative Review, said, "One very disturbing aspect of TISA is the document uncovered by WikiLeaks, revealing an entire section on immigration referring to movement of natural persons. This section discusses commitments by the parties not to place undue burdens on visas and singles out face-to-face interviews as an example of overly burdensome procedures. One of the parties to TISA is Pakistan. Horowitz asked what would seem to be an obvious question. Do we really want to join in an agreement that would loosen restrictions on visas from Pakistan? Turkey is also a TISA country. Pakistan and Turkey are home to thousands of Islamic extremists. Why would anyone think it's a good idea to make it easier for such people to enter the United States? There is a provision that keeps the president from using new trade agreement authority to change immigration policy. However, that provision is non-binding and non-enforceable. The key point is that we're not talking about traditional trade agreements. These alliances are not about jointly lowering tariffs. They're about future governance of the planet Earth. One of the most important studies I've ever done is this audio series on the book of Daniel. In these 19 CDs, I go paragraph by paragraph, in some cases verse by verse, through the book of the ancient prophet. I provide an in-depth historical background on Daniel and show how it relates to the prophecies that would be precisely fulfilled later. And I detail how all of these predictions are fitting exactly into the scenario that he prophesied would happen just before the return of Christ. Each set of 19 audio CDs comes in an attractive and convenient album. You can purchase your copy of this study of the book of Daniel for just $79.99, which includes shipping and handling. Simply call toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE or visit HalLindsey.com. You can also send check or money order to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. Order your Daniel CD set today. Australian intelligence reports that ISIS now has enough radioactive material to make a large dirty bomb. In the latest edition of its propaganda magazine, ISIS brags that it's working to acquire weapons of mass destruction, including a black market nuclear bomb. Authorities fear that Pakistan would be the source of such a device. ISIS has taken over several Syrian chemical weapons depots. Yes, a few months ago, the mainstream media gave us the impression that all such weapons had been removed and destroyed. For instance, the BBC ran a story with the headline, "Last of Syria's Chemical Weapons Shipped Out." People read headlines far more than they read the actual stories. Below the BBC headline, it said, "The last of Syria's declared chemical weapons have been shipped out of the country for destruction." The difference is huge. The chemical weapons hadn't all been shipped out, just the ones that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad admitted to. Last month, we learned that Assad's government is still using chemical weapons, and if he's still using them, then they haven't all been destroyed. Bloomberg reported the U.S. government was informed months ago that an international monitoring body found traces of chemical weapons that President Bashar al-Assad had promised to turn over, including sarin gas, a clear violation of the deal he struck with President Obama after crossing the administration's red line 2 years ago. Last year, when Syria used chemical weapons, it was big news. But this time, few in the press even reported it. The president didn't draw a red line, but at least we know for sure that there are still chemical weapons in Syria. Early in the civil war, Assad feared that his massive stockpile might fall into enemy hands. So he had those weapons dispersed to smaller stockpiles around the country. Today, ISIS controls more of Syria than Assad does. That means ISIS must have chemical weapons to go along with enough nuclear material for a dirty bomb. They may already have the ability to buy a black market nuclear bomb. But if they have WMDs, and they almost certainly do, why haven't they used them? They seem to be holding them for a special target. Perhaps they're thinking of something in Iraq or Syria, but other possibilities include Israel, Europe, or the United States. In the aftermath of 9/11, Western nations went to work shoring up areas of vulnerability to terrorism. Improvements were made, but every time a new study comes out on the subject, we see how far we have yet to go. We recently learned that Homeland Security auditors were able to slip mock explosives and weapons past Transportation Security Administration, or TSA. They got past airport checkpoints 67 out of 70 times they tried. Then we learned that TSA approved the hiring of 73 airport workers whose names were listed in a federal database of possible terrorists. These people are walking security threats, and TSA cleared them for full access to secure areas of the airport. We have many such vulnerabilities, and terror groups study them at length. There are untold numbers of ways to get weapons of mass destruction inside America's borders. I don't say that to ignore and put down good people doing heroic work every day to keep us safe. I'm saying that those people are pushing a really big boulder up a very steep hill. The book of Habakkuk feels eerily like a snapshot of America in the year 2015. It begins with a brief but profound introduction, the oracle which Habakkuk the prophet saw. Where the New American Standard Bible says oracle, the King James Version uses the word burden. It's the Hebrew word masa. It has to do with the work of carrying or lifting something. In this case, the burden was a prophecy, and in more ways than one. That burden was heavy. We know surprisingly little about Habakkuk, the man, but of all the ancient prophets, he is among the most relatable. He was very human, a lot like us. After introduction, he jumped right into the middle of a deep lament. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? That question recurs several times in the Bible. If you've known the Lord for a while, you've probably asked it yourself. How long, O Lord? Habakkuk then laments the evil around him, violence, plundering, strife, contention, and lawlessness. He said that the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. Does that sound something like your local news? He was saying, Lord, the world's a mess, and I don't see you doing anything about it. To this, God gives a stunning and surprising answer. Look among the nations, observe, be astonished, wonder, because I am doing something in your days you would not believe if you were told. The King James says, I will work a work in your days which ye will not believe. Habakkuk thought that God had not heard his prayer and was not doing anything about the awful ugliness going on in the world. But in fact, God was doing something amazing. He said, be astonished. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It probably sounded wonderful to Habakkuk, too, until God told him more about it. The actual plan gave Habakkuk a new lament. In verse 6, God says, For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, that fierce and impetuous people who march throughout the earth to seize dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and authority originates with themselves. God's answer to the sin and violence surrounding Habakkuk was to raise up the Chaldeans, better known as the Babylonians. The country was located in the modern-day Iraq, the birthplace of ISIS. Hearing that God planned to use Babylon to sack Jerusalem was not the answer Habakkuk wanted to hear. So often humans complain about a good God allowing bad things to happen. Why doesn't he do something about it? Do these people really want God to step into the middle of our society's violence and debauchery with justice? His judgment will come, but I don't think most of the people doing the complaining really want it. I think they want to blame God for the choices he allows humanity to make, but I don't think they want to take responsibility for their own choices. They want God to fix the world, but they don't want him to fix themselves as individuals. They are the religious who want revival, but not personal repentance. They are the atheists and agnostics who think God should prove himself by removing the effect of evil in the world without removing evil itself. They would like him to remove the painful results of our choices while in no way restricting choice. One day, God is going to stop evil in its tracks. He's going to cleanse the world of it, but it's not going to be fun. That's what Habakkuk faced. He complained about sin, then learned to his chagrin that judgment was coming. He argued with God that Babylon was far worse than Judah, and God agreed with that. He said that he would use Babylon to judge his people, but he would then judge Babylon for its misdeeds. Through Moses, God had long ago warned Israel of what would happen if they turned away from him. Not only that, he prophesied that they would turn away. He said they would be carried off to other nations. They would suffer painful and ongoing persecution. It was terrible news for Habakkuk to learn that Judah had reached the fifth cycle of God's discipline as outlined by Moses in Leviticus 26. God was allowing them to be overtaken by an enemy and dispersed into the nations. But there is good news in this as well. It showed that God was in control. Nothing was happening that he had not foreseen. And if the negative part of the prophecy was true, then so was the positive. Yes, Judah was about to begin the next phase of what was known to historians as the diaspora. But the same God who foretold the scattering of the Jews also said that one day they would come together again as a nation. One day they would regain control of Jerusalem, and at that point, after that, they would turn again to the Lord, their God, and receive his Messiah. As with Habakkuk, our immediate future looks difficult. But the good news is that the God who said all along that these times would be happening promised to rapture us out of the world before the great wave of judgment begins. In the meantime, he promises to take care of his own. He said Israel would become a nation again, and after thousands of years, it happened. Jews are returning to the land from all over the world. Once again, they control Jerusalem. If God's promises can be trusted for nations and the fate of the world, surely we can rely on them in our personal lives. To anyone who wants to prosper in the coming years on earth, I have a simple piece of advice. Support Israel. The age-old promise to Abraham has no expiration dates on it. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. In the days of Joshua, the fame of Israel's God reached all the way to the second generation of Rahab the harlot. She said to the men Joshua sent to spy out Jericho, I know that the Lord has given you the land. She chose a God she had not known over everything she did know. To flourish in troubled times, start where Rahab started. Bless Israel. Acknowledge that God has given them their land. But even though supporting Israel will help you, it will not ultimately save you. To prosper, not just in time, but into and throughout eternity, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Trust and acknowledge him. Believe in the salvation he has paid for you. Receive the forgiveness that God himself has given you as a result of Jesus' sacrifice for your sake. Right now, invite Jesus Christ to come into your life. He alone will bring you right into salvation. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.